Karslake rested his forearms on the battered table between them. They'd all pulled a full shift and then some. The weight of the day and friction of the job lingered like Fowler's body odour. Karslake loosened his tie, beads of sweat forming on his brow. The space was small and the radiator against the far wall couldn't be turned down, the valve broken and awaiting repair. "What happened, Sol?" said Karslake, his voice indulgent. "I took Tom to the fair. It's his birthday." "We know that," said Fowler. "Tell us something new." Gray paused. New. To him, this was all new. A unique emotion, perhaps the last he would ever feel. Karslake glared at Fowler, who held his hands up in surrender. "Carry on, Sol." "I took Tom to the fair. It's his birthday," repeated Gray, his memory organized in a straight line. "Just the two of you?" A sharp nod. "The original plan was we'd go as a family, but Hope wasn't feeling too well, so Kate stayed behind. We were all disappointed. Hope's only 2 years older, and it would have been great fun for her too." "How old is Tom?" Karslake knew the answer. It was for the tape. 6. He's 6. And he's out there somewhere alone. Gray rose from his seat, driven to start looking for his son again. Karslake placed a restraining hand on his arm. "Sit down. We've got all boots on the ground right now. Understand?" After a moment, Gray nodded and settled again. "Good. Now, what was the fair like?" Gray skipped back a few hours in his mind. Bright lights, screams of enjoyment, loud music. "You know how they are. Seen one, you've seen them all." Gray shrugged, stubbed out the cigarette. "Go on," prompted Karslake. "I came home late. Shift overran." "When doesn't it?" "True." Gray tried to laugh, but it sounded more like a wheeze. "Kate was angry about it. Reminded me it was Tom's birthday. The local kids had been and gone, the presents opened and played with, the cake cut and demolished. She told me the one thing you had to do was get home on time." "What did you say?" "The same as every other working father." Karslake shrugged. "Why don't you just tell me?" "I have to work to pay the bills. No job, no money. Rough with the smooth, you know. I bet that went down well." Gray grimaced. "No." "And then?" "I didn't even get changed. I took Tom straight out. Kate didn't thank me. She clearly thought it was the least I could do. Tom was delighted, though." Gray smiled, his penultimate happy memory. The pleasure dropped away almost instantly. It felt inappropriate. "We won a few things on the stalls, went on a couple of rides." Gray remembered sitting on a roundabout and then some swings. "Did you hit the dodgems?" asked Fowler. "They're great fun. First thing I head for." Tom had shrieked with delight when they were thumped into by another dodgem. Karslake furrowed his brow at Fowler. "Keep going, Sol." Tom had been nagging me all evening about the ghost train, but we left the house in a rush, and I hadn't picked up my wallet, so I was short of cash. In the end, I folded. I told Tom it would be the last thing we'd do, then it was home time. I was knackered. "So you went to the ghost train?" nudged Karslake. I tried to get out of it one last time by saying we were short of money, that we both couldn't ride, but he choked, a moan catching in his throat. The other two detectives waited for Gray to compose himself. Tom was so keen he said he'd go by himself. I had two choices. I could take him home kicking and screaming and face Kate's wrath, or, you know. "You let him go on," said Fowler, unable to keep the disbelief out of his voice. "The lad's 6 years old." "If I could go back and change it, believe me, I would." "There's no need to justify yourself," said Karslake. What happened after that? We queued. Tom held my hand the whole time. I could feel him trembling with excitement. The car arrived. He sat down and looked so small that I almost stopped in there and then. Then the bar dropped down and off he went into the darkness, a huge grin on his face. Gray stared into the middle distance. He didn't come out again. What do you mean? When his carriage came back, it was empty. What did you do? I just stood there. Then I dropped everything I was holding and pushed inside. It was dark. I fumbled around, couldn't find anyone, not even the ghost. I shouted for Tom. No reply. I ran out behind the ride. Nothing. It was as if he'd vanished into thin air. And then, a heartbeat. Another. I screamed. 10 years later. Death was often pointless, but given the circumstances, a plummet of 5 floors from balcony to roadside was at the extreme end of the spectrum. Detective Sergeant Solomon Gray was surrounded by white. Powerful lights blazed over the scene, the beams reflecting off the canvas tent sides, erected to shield the body from the elements and preserve any evidence. The jumper was young, a boy on the cusp of manhood. When Gray first caught sight of the corpse, that same shock arced through him like it always did whenever a report came in about a child in trouble or worse, dead. Could it be his Tom? He squatted down to take a closer look. No, this one was older. Relief then, hot on its heels, guilt. Once more he'd avoided facing up to reality. What the hell drove someone with their whole life ahead of them into a swan dive with only one possible outcome? Suicide cases. He hated them. According to an eyewitness, the kid had screamed all the way down, a natural response. Or had he changed his mind when it was too late? Or maybe he was unwilling to jump in the first place. The kid looked remarkably peaceful, given that one side of his body was smashed into the pavement. Gravity and concrete had fashioned him into a chaotic canvas, an abstract that wouldn't look out of place in the recently built art museum less than a mile away. If it wasn't for the Jackson Pollock blood spatter and the vacant staring eyes, Gray could have imagined him asleep. Gray's mind was like an artist's palette, assumptions and suppositions whirling into one colourful mess, the past joining with the present, a reminder of his wife's passing, by her own hand, too. "Are you all right?" asked the attending pathologist, Dr. Ben Clough, who loomed over Gray, casting a long shadow. He peered at Gray through his glasses with unblinking eyes. Clough was a neat, precise man, combed sandy hair, trimmed fingernails, washed clothes, the antithesis of Gray in appearance, identical to Gray in the difficulty he had connecting with people. Clough was competent, bordering on arrogant. Clough had the wiry physique of an athlete, all sinew and muscle. When not working ridiculously long hours, he pounded the streets, loping mile after mile. Most presumed it was an escape from his job. Gray knew Clough just preferred solitude. He could relate to that. "I've seen everything I need to," said Gray. "Haven't we all?" Clough sounded much older than he looked. "I'll call when the post-mortem is scheduled." The pair exchanged brief farewells out of courtesy before Gray gratefully stepped out of the evidence tent. It was overcast and chilly outside. Arlington House, a granite grey high-rise on the Margate seafront, and the deceased's diving board, was perfectly in keeping with the seasonal inclemency and the dingy atmosphere. It looked like a monumental tomb. Gray counted 5 floors and fixed his eyes on the offending balcony. It didn't look that high up. He wiped a hand over his forehead. It came away slick. A gust of wind slapped Gray, reminding him it was December, when autumn was buried and past and winter was tightening its grip.